Yo, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Today is not Saturday. It is Wednesday. No, it's not Wednesday. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday, May 24th. It is 6:06 p.m. Griff, how is your week coming? You've had Monday and you've had Tuesday. How's everything looking for you?
Well, starting with, I actually feel a little bit better. So good, as long as you got good energy, you can pretty much accomplish anything. But yeah, it's been good. Just hot out here in California. I think it's like 96 today. So I don't know, just kind of battling that. A lot of dry heat. But work-wise, we'll grind through it. I actually just got done with probably my busiest week of the year. So that week after that, nothing is as quite that busy. So I don't know. It's going pretty well.
Was it the busiest week of the year? Like it's typically like that, or it just happened to be your busiest week of the year up to this point?
Well, a lot of so I do sales, right? In sales, I'm not sure what it's like for everybody, but in my job, there's key activities, right? Like you want to do these certain revenue generating activities just because they're shown to do well, right? So I do lunches for offices, try to take doctors out to dinner, and sometimes even trying to have the founder of my company come out and speak with them. You know what I'm saying? Because he actually invented our technology. And sometimes with doctors, it's just better to relay doctor to doctor than it is for me to try to even, say much. And last week I just had a bunch of lunches. A lot of them had my founder out here to speak twice. And had another dinner on top of that. So it was just a heavy activity week. And everybody has those at work,
For sure.
But it was just a lot in a row. You know what I'm saying? And in sales, we could start a whole podcast on sales. I mean,
I was just going to ask. I mean, you and I have both been in sales at one point or another. I think we both. I still am at some level. You definitely are. What are some of the things you've learned over? I mean, what we've been started in our careers for 2 years now or so, maybe right around there. What are some of the things that you've kind of learned in that time? What do you think?
About I guess to be successful, meaning in sales or not successful.
I guess maybe not just in sales, but what have you learned in your career up to this point that you think translates really well to man, this has helped me in my life just in general?
Yeah, I would say
We were kind of talking about this last week or week and a half ago, whatever it was.
It's such a good question because I feel like I've learned a lot. Just because we come from football and then I went straight into outside sales, which business to business sales at that, which is a really interesting paradigm shift because what I've learned is it's really important to be true to your word. It really plays well. Don't overpromise yourself. Just deliver what you can deliver. Because it seems like in life there's a lot of people who say they can do a lot of stuff, and there's very few people who can actually do anything. And so it's I think I've just learned to really try to watch what I promise to deliver. Because if you consistently under deliver, you'll lose the customer, you'll lose the relationship, the friendship, the whatever. You know what I'm saying? Nobody likes to be disappointed over and over again. I think that's probably one of the kind of put on the spot, but I think that's pretty much the biggest thing I've learned after being in sales is just trying to be true to your word 100% of the time. And when you're not, just throw the apology out there, take it on the chin and move on. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I would say that's genuinely probably the biggest thing I've learned in the last 2 years. I don't know about yourself, but it's just it. Just being in sales, being straight up, dude. That's pays, in my opinion. But I don't know. What have you learned in the last couple of years between insurance and Ascend commercial building?
I really got to refer back to the conversation we were having a couple weeks ago about just communication. Which kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying, right? Is I don't. Of course, I guess this comes with confidence, right? You've got to build certain foundations of who you are. And you've got to be comfortable and understand who you are, right? But at this point, for myself, having built these certain foundations, and we could have a conversation about those, right? But man, just be who you are and just communicate, right? Whatever's got to happen, ask the questions, I think one of the things that I had that we were talking about a couple weeks ago again was not being afraid. Don't be afraid to be seen at the starting line. Like sometimes whenever you feel like you're beyond a certain point, and maybe you are in some sense in some parts of life, but man, I'm at the beginning of my career, or at the beginning of this race in this part of my life, right? This part of my life I have not taken care of so great, and I'm at the starting line and I'm embarrassed to be here, right? A great example would be people at the gym, right? If you haven't been going to the gym and you're out of shape and you don't look good and you don't feel good about how you look, but then you go to the gym and you feel nervous about being at the gym because you don't look good. It's like, don't be afraid to be seen there. That's
Right.
where you've got to start, right? And so I guess kind of to round that thought off, it's like, man, just be who you are. Ask the questions when you need to ask the questions, and sometimes the truth gets you in trouble.
Yeah.
But the truth is the best thing that you could tell, right? I mean, it's like this is this is genuinely me. This is
Yeah.
genuinely what I'm thinking. This is genuinely what's happening in me. And if you get thrown to the curb for that, dude, like you weren't in a good situation to jump, from the jump.
If you ask two experts the same question, they're going to give you two different answers. Sorry, if you ask two experts the same question about like the same exact thing that they're both experts on, they're going to give you two different opinions every single time. So I think life is a lot about trusting your intuition, but also staying like open-minded and learning enough to actually be successful when something good is hitting you in the face, just kind of knowing to take it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely been interesting.
I think another part that we were thinking about at one point a while back was, with social media as big as it is today, it's so easy to get caught up in what is this guy doing? What is that guy doing? Where am I at? Just this comparative trap that you fall into, right? Of trying to measure your success level to others around you. And of course, it's interesting in a sense, right? Because you and I are a great example, right? I mean, you and I grew up in college football and had very similar outlooks on life through that, and then we leave college at the same time and we start careers at the same time. Of course, different paths, right? Different careers, but at the same time, right? And so it's interesting to look. Okay, where's this guy? Right? Nico is another one of those guys, all kind of on the same timeline, but we're all on three different paths, right? And so it's interesting. You and Nico and I were talking about it at one point. What was a busy day for you, a busy day for me, and a busy day for Nico? They're all three different things. It's three completely different things, or like a really great week for you, a great week for me, a great week for Nico is like those are all different weeks, And so it's really tough to try to compare apples to oranges because it's like they're kind of the same, they're kind of the same shape, they're kind of the same size, but it's like it's all different,
Yeah, it is. That's a really good point. You got to really have like goals for yourself, not like goals that involve, like how am I doing in comparison to something else? Just like you got to have goals straight up, just goals for yourself, whatever those goals might be, whether it's like making a lot of money, getting ripped, whatever it might be. Like you got to have your own personal goals, and you got to have a finish line drawn out that you're good with. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, just like what you're good with. You know what I'm saying? Because honestly, here's another thing I learned in life. So once you start talking about Bitcoin and you work out a lot and you're willing to try new things that are on a little bit of the fringe, and you're really like, when you're chasing success and not looking good, you know what I'm saying? Like when you're actually chasing the success, like when you're actually pursuing something, it's really weird in life. Like other people look at it and it's just like weird to them. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people are really okay with, lying a good chunk, having their career, kind of just doing what it takes to like hang around. Not a lot of people are out here really trying to make a new avenue. And like, as this is a Bitcoin podcast, the moment you really get into Bitcoin, like Nyc and I have, you're choosing a different path. Like you are literally choosing a path that most people do not appreciate right now, because it is totally against the way they're living their life right now, whether you like it or not. But in life, you got to be comfortable with that when you believe in it. And I don't know, like, it's kind of tie that back into this Bitcoin podcast as we get to this market check here. It's like, you can you can talk a big game, you can listen to a lot of people talk, but you got to believe in something at some point. And you can't just let every outside influence change what you think all the time. You have to like really be careful about how you change, when you change, and the change that you make, it better be impactful. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
Started though. It was a good first 10 minutes right there, brother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man, that was fun for sure. It's interesting. Moving on to the market check here, we've had such interesting price action, here recently. Again, we kind of talked about it last night when we tried to film this the first time, and I had thunderstorm issues and we had connection issues. But we kind of talked about this, but coming in, Griff, you and I, this is kind of like our first real downturn. It feels like, I don't know, maybe it's not for you, but for me, it's like I bought at 57. We went up to 69 and we've been falling off ever since. Right. So kind of seeing the first like real downturn, it's like, man, this is kind of interesting to see play out in real time. Pulling up the numbers here, looking at Bitcoin here just on the day, or let's look at the week here again. Look at this. I mean, we're up in the 30s, and then we come back down to the high 20s, and then we climb up kind of slow, get back up into the 30s, and then we fall back off to the high 20s. And it's done this a couple of times here. I mean, just looking at this area right here. What is this from the beginning of, or from mid-May, May 12th through to today? We've gone up into the 30, 30, 31 to 28, 29. We've stayed around in that range. We're just sitting around, floating around right here, which for you guys listening today, again, is Tuesday, May 24th, 6:19 p.m. And the price level for Bitcoin is sitting at 29,750. And let's look at the day on the S&P 500. Looks like it started up a little higher, fell off, and then slowly climbed through the rest of the day. On the week, still down. I've got to imagine the NASDAQ's going to look the exact same. Let's look at the 1 month. Yeah, so everything's trending down right now. Dow Jones is going down. I mean, everything's going down. Crude oil is still up in over $100 a barrel. So, man, it's interesting seeing some of these strange times for us when it's like the first time that we've really seen the market go down. But the important thing is that one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. We don't have to worry about this thing, man. I mean,
we need to start pulling up some like market checks for just how many nodes there are out there, how many Lightning nodes there are out there, what the hash rate is. Just because like it is,
that would be interesting.
Semi-depressing. I mean, like looking at some of these charts, there's a lot of people getting into Bitcoin though in the time of, this would be considered capitulation, right? When you just keep going from like 30 to 60 to 30 to 60. But one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. And since you've gotten into Bitcoin, I mean, how many major announcements has there been about different payment systems accepting Bitcoin, different countries accepting Bitcoin?
For sure.
I mean, you're seeing some of it play out. And I think like we were talking about, maybe it was yesterday before we actually cut it off. But the bigger that circular economy of Bitcoin, like that it grows, the bigger it gets, the more places you can spend your Bitcoin. I think the more real it also is, because it'd be nice to have like your Bitcoin stack for the 30 year and then your actual Lightning Bitcoin where you could just spend it wherever right now today. Because I'd do it, to be honest with you. I'd take everything in Bitcoin. And then if I could spend it, it'd be great. And I think once we get to that point where you don't actually have to pick between store of value, medium of exchange, and it really is just like infiltrating both ways, it's kind of when the price doesn't matter as much anymore. Now, is the price going to go up? Is Bitcoin become more valuable? I just think that it's going to be tough to traditionally measure that, because if it does become as successful as we hope it does, and we do hope that Bitcoin goes as far as we think it can go, that doesn't exactly mean good things for the dollar. It doesn't exactly mean that $1 million Bitcoin is worth, what we actually have been told what $1 million should be worth. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting, it's another paradigm shift for not just like us, but for the whole world. I mean, dollars is supposed to be the most valuable thing out there. And as we know, day by day, this thing just keeps shrinking, becomes less and less and less valuable. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the remainder of this year.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Griff, I'm excited to move into another guest episode.
Yeah, here we go.
I mean, we've had, I don't know how many in a row, man, but I'm excited about bringing new people on. I feel like we've learned so much from the guests we've had on the past several weeks, and we've got still several more to come on over the next several weeks, which is exciting, man. It's a lot of fun. But I met this guy this past April, at my very first Tulsa Bitcoin meetup. And we got to talk a little bit. We got to chat a little bit. We didn't go too far into the conversation, but we got to talk a little bit. He was a cool guy, liked him. I met a lot of people at that first one, so didn't really get to meet in too much depth a lot of people, but got to see him again at the Tulsa Bitcoin meetup this May, just a couple of weeks ago, and we really got to sit down and talk about a lot more things. We've got to get a little bit more into the details, and it was a great conversation. Got to meet his wife. His wife is super sweet. Janae and I went to dinner with him and his wife, and we got to talk and chat some more. Super fun to get to like meet real life Bitcoiners, which is it's funny because we've talked about this before. For vast majority of people, sorry, can't get my words out. For the vast majority of people, you live this Bitcoin world online, right? And that's how I started my deal. That's why you and I were talking on the phone so damn much, is because I didn't have anybody else to talk to in real life, right? So it's fun to get to meet people in real life. And without further ado, I'm not even going to try to tell this guy's story. I'm going to let him tell it once we get on here. But Sean, welcome on to the show, brother. We are excited to have you on again. Maybe we can get through it the whole time this day.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Were you at the gym here? Did you just get home, just get finished up in the shower or something?
Just got out of the shower, exactly.
What'd you hit at the gym today?
I boxed, so I was at the boxing gym. Hit the water bag.
Boxing gym.
Yeah.
Where's the boxing gym here in Tulsa?
It's I won't give away the location on here, but yeah, it's South Tulsa. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm there a lot.
Griff, you're muted there, Griff.
It's his secret sauce, man. You can't give away his secrets.
Yeah, it is actually
yeah.
It's a pretty sweet spot. It's like you wouldn't expect it, and it's got one of the nicest rings I've ever seen.
So he doesn't want to give it away. It's like a good trying to think, like in Reno. You guys know, you guys probably never been to Reno, Nevada, but all sushi in Reno is pretty much like 99% of the restaurants that do sushi, it's all you can eat sushi. So there's a place in Reno, Tokyo Sushi, has my heart. But man, like when I was in school, it took like 2 good reviews and you couldn't get a seat anymore. You know what I'm saying? So you got to be careful about letting people know your spots if they really are that good. Unfortunately for the small business owner, you can't blow them up like for free all the time, which is what it is. Hurts your experience.
Sean, I've got a hilarious story. Speaking of sushi, and I'll make this quick here because we gotta get into your story a little bit. But Griff and I, whenever I think he mentioned yesterday during that last semester of college, spring of 2020, whenever we were both free of college football at that point, we just had classes. We were door dashing, making some money. We had a very high time preference. We were blowing money. We were our now fiancés like to joke about it and say that we were dating during that time because we were just hanging out all the time. We had so much free time. Well, anyways, we'd go a couple of times. We had gone a couple of times to do all you can eat sushi at this one place. Well, we had found out after the fact that if you don't eat all the sushi, they make you pay full price for it.
Oh yeah,
not a good situation. I think we had gotten all this sushi ordered, and we got we got a decent amount of ways in it, and I was like, dude, I'm sorry, but like I can't eat any more, dude. Like I don't know what we're gonna do. And he was like, what do you mean? We had like half of it left. Well, we ended up we were gonna pay, and she was like, "Hey, if you guys don't eat all of this, you got to pay full price." And we were like, "Oh, so we're not doing that. We're not gonna be paying full price for this." And so I think we each left with a couple of pieces of sushi in our pockets and in our hoodie bags, or our hoodie like pockets, in the front.
Yeah, man, that's
we were on the way back home, and Griff is eating a piece of sushi and chunking one out of the window. Eating a piece of
All at the
sushi
same
and
time.
chunking one out the window.
It's crazy. Nobody ever calls you on that stuff at those sushi places, but of course, that one time, like, we're just like dead to rights, and we're like, well, kind of like eat up or pay up time, We figured it out though. I mean, slowly. Sean, do they have good sushi over in Toronto? I assume they have.
Oh yeah, man. Toronto. Yeah, people who aren't from there don't know, but Toronto's got the best food in the world. It's a crazy food city. Yeah. And everyone always thinks I'm crazy when I say that, but like if you ever go, you'll find out. It's actually crazy.
Just because
why
the
do you say that?
nice, the food is really good. Like,
it's hard to put into words, man. It's just it's a big city. It's a place like New York, and where there's just like the best of everything. And the food scene there, for whatever reason, there's just I would say it's a few things. I mean, I think the food scene everywhere kind of took over the past 10 years. I personally think a big part of it is just phones. I think it's one of the last like oases where people actually put their phone away and hang out and talk to people. So I actually happen to think that that's part of like the whole food scene exploding over the past decade. I think that's part of it. And then I also think part of it's the fact that the money broke, and it's just like that roaring 20s hedonism that we just came out of over the past decade. Especially in Canada, more so than America. Young people just got priced out of the retail or out of the real estate market. Like a bungalow up there is like 800 to 1.3 million. If you're 25 to 35 years old, you were trying to save up a down payment. It just kept getting further away. And it just resulted in this kind of degenerate hedonism. People weren't starting families. It's all brunch, travel, dinner. So you would go out to a restaurant on Wednesday night, like any restaurant, Wednesday night, 11 p.m. in Toronto, it's packed. And packed with like people 25 to 40 years old out for dinner when they're supposed to be, starting families and settling down and all that stuff. And it was just this weird degenerate lifestyle that I remember, my wife, like 2018, 2019, we would go out for dinner, and like almost every time, I hated being that guy, but I just had this overwhelming feeling. I was like, this isn't going to last. This is almost over. Like something's going to happen here. And, when COVID hit, I just, I didn't plan on being that right. But it was definitely a weird thing to experience. But anyways, point being that the food scene there benefited from it. The food in Toronto is incredible. It's just like pure hedonism. It's some of the best food in the world.
Fiat money.
Well, so you
no arguments there, I don't think.
What's that?
I said fiat money has produced some good food. At least that's one thing that it's given to us.
Absolutely.
A lot of people like to eat, plus take pictures of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it kind of goes along with fiat in the time preference deal. I mean, fiat does make us all have much higher time preferences than if you had like money that wasn't getting printed away, obviously. So people are really looking for that good, cheap, quick experience. Nobody's really in anything for the long haul anymore. Nobody like works anymore. Nobody has like, I got a little win today. Nobody knows like about competing for the little wins anymore. So I can agree with that sentiment, because it's like out here in California, a lot of good food, a lot of people eating at really nice restaurants. And I'm like, what? I don't know. Like, you're either making a lot of money, or you guys are like clearly not like, like you're saying, starting a family, trying to
there's just no point in saving, right? Like, that money, that $100,000 that you're supposed to save over 5 years to buy a house, the houses just keep getting further. Like, nobody can afford a $1.3 million mortgage on a regular salary. Even like a couple of lawyers like can't afford that. You know what I mean? And so they just gave up and went out for dinner every Wednesday and Tuesday and Thursday and Friday and Monday. Like literally that's what was going on in Toronto.
Going out is a form of giving up. In a sense, hey, I mean, like,
and that's what it felt like. Right? It felt like an end of the world party for like 5 years.
That is an interesting standpoint. So obviously, you're from Canada. You're from Canada. Well, we got to get the story down a little bit. From Canada, he's out here in Oklahoma. That's where you and Nick met. You guys met at the Bitcoin meetup, correct? And You're going back to Canada now, not to stay there. Obviously, you're kind of tired of it. But why don't you tell us just a little bit about how like you were there, then here. You're a small business owner as well. I'm assuming you can do some of that stuff over here in the States once you kind of get settled down. But we should definitely
we'll see how that all plays out. The immigration situation is a bit awkward. It makes it difficult to start a business. But so I left Canada in September. My wife and I we needed to get out. My gym had been closed for a year and a half. It was just, it's no place to raise a family. We were planning to start a family. My wife's pregnant. We're expecting our first kid in December, and we were, we had to get out of the country. So we left in September, went down to Austin, capital city for Bitcoin. Got to meet a bunch of my internet friends in person, and that was really fun. We randomly found our way through Tulsa, and it just felt like the right place to live. Even in Austin, you walk past elementary school, they were forcing kids to wear masks outside. And so we came up to Tulsa, went to the gathering place for an afternoon, 500 kids, no masks. So we're just like, okay, Tulsa it is, let's do it. Yeah. And all kinds of doors started opening. It just feels like home right away. So yeah, we're super happy to be here.
So you guys were visiting, obviously, like Austin, Tulsa. Were these because you guys kind of knew they were good Bitcoin spots? Or
Tulsa had nothing to do with Bitcoin. Tulsa was actually just like, we didn't even mean to come here. We happened to be here for an afternoon, and it was totally off the radar. And like I said, we went to the gathering place, and we just saw those kids without masks. And, we were really just looking for a time machine. We just wanted to like go back to the early 2000s. Like back home, like I said, my gym had been closed for a year and a half. My brother coaches hockey. The hockey program shut down for a year. And it was just like the idea of raising kids there was just kind of off the table. And, same with a lot of parts of the US. And so we were just looking for the furthest thing from that where we could just raise kids in a normal environment.
Man, and that's Tulsa, huh? It produces kids like this guy, Nick. So hopefully you're okay with that.
Exactly.
He's a good guy.
Well, man, the people from Tulsa are incredible. It's something I didn't expect or know, but ever since I got here, I've just been blown away by the quality of people here. It's amazing. It's actually really special.
Just jealous you guys have a bunch of Bitcoin friends there.
It's kind of interesting, because there's, and I'm sure it's like this with every city, right? I mean, it obviously is, right? But you've got North Tulsa, you've got East Tulsa, you've got West Tulsa, you've got South Tulsa. And all the different little areas within those, and they're all completely different parts of Tulsa, right? And then you've got downtown Tulsa that's kind of in between, like right in Midtown and North Tulsa and West Tulsa. It's kind of right in the middle of that, and it's pretty interesting because you've got different people all in those different areas, And so West Tulsa, where I grew up, is kind of more of like the older, more industrial kind of. A little bit more country, but not quite country yet.
Yeah, a lot of working class. Yeah,
a lot of working class for sure. And then South Tulsa is more like the really like nicer neighborhoods, more wealth in south part of Tulsa. East Tulsa, I'm not super duper familiar with. That's more like Broken Arrow area, correct?
Yeah,
I think. And
I would say Broken Arrow is kind of just like a sideways extension of South Tulsa now. It's kind of like South Tulsa swinging out. It's just kind of like medium affluent suburb. It's pretty nice out there now. There's tons of new development, but it's crazy here, man. The real estate market, like you can buy like a decent new house for $250,000. Like where I come from, that's just, I think that's a big, we were able to pick that up like right when we got here, that one afternoon. There was something about the city where you could still get a house for $250,000, and that protects that degenerate slide into hedonism, and people are still able to picture having a family at 25, 30 years old, and that's what's happening here. It's just there's tons of young families. Like having 4 kids is super normal. Having 4 kids by 30 is super normal. That's like totally not a thing where I come from in Canada. The west side of Toronto, I don't know one person who had a kid before 30.
Wow. That's a big piece of it.
Yeah, there's tons of cool stuff to do in Tulsa too. That's not like there's just a lot of cool little shops, a lot of cool little, where we went ate, had tacos and margaritas the other night is super cool little spot, different parts of Tulsa. They've always got different little things going on here. And, but it's a lot of fun, but
the way
I'm excited to have
in Toronto, there's like 250 of those restaurants that are all like top notch. and you can't go to 250 restaurants. So like, what's the point of that? It doesn't matter. You don't really sacrifice anything in terms of quality coming to Tulsa. There's some amazing restaurants and coffee shops and stuff here. It's just, there's only like 20, but like, that's all you need. I can't get around more than 20 good restaurants, going out like once every week or two, something like that. You got your favorites. And by the time it's been 6 months since you've been to one of your favorite restaurants, that's all you can fit in anyway. So, no, you don't really sacrifice anything in Tulsa on that front. It's like really top-notch food, great music venues, tons of art, tons of, it's great golf here, tons of other sports too. If you're a kid, like football and baseball and all that stuff's huge. So
now let's get down to the nuts and bolts.
He's awkward.
Michael Saylor's a spook. I want to pick back up on that part of the conversation. I've been waiting since yesterday to hear your Michael Saylor is a spook argument per se. I just want to hear it because I just want to.
Yeah, let's dive in on that. Well,
I want to go right into it.
My perspective is that Michael Saylor just is a spook. That's just like, as far as I'm concerned, that's a matter of fact. Like, I'll summarize his story in a way that makes that sound super obvious, and people might think it's crazy, but this is just my opinion. It's like, here's a military scholarship to MIT. Oops, you're really smart. You have a fake heart murmur. We can't put you in the military. Here's a job at DuPont. Oh, here's some funding. Please start a big data firm and locate 1 mile from Langley. And that's his career. You're the wealthiest guy in Washington, D.C. for 20 years. And that's his story up until he became a Bitcoiner. Now, like, whether he's acting as part of like an orchestrated op trying to drag America towards Bitcoin, I don't know. Like, maybe he's acting totally in a personal capacity, trying to drag the country in the direction that he thinks best, and he's just a patriotic dude, and that's totally possible. I don't actually know the answer to that question, but objectively speaking, you don't own a big data firm at all in the U.S. Without being involved with intelligence. That's just, as far as I'm concerned, just a given. And when you like layer in, the fact that it's located a mile from Langley and that he was on a military scholarship to MIT and, had this like heart murmur that he like couldn't go to battle. Like, it's just, and that the heart murmur was fake. It's just like, it's all super, it seems pretty obvious.
So to push you a little further down that rabbit hole, you mentioned, Michael Saylor may be working in some type of operative to bring America to Bitcoin, or Bitcoin to America. We had kind of also talked a little bit about how the government in 1971 officially goes off the gold standard. And the other night we had talked about how they could have been using 401ks and 30-year fixed rate mortgages to hide and help the American people participate in what they have been doing. And you kind of went on to talk about this unraveling of the credit economy, this deleveraging process that we're in. And you mentioned something I thought was really interesting, and maybe Michael Saylor has something to do with this, but this idea that we're in the middle of the largest debt default that the world has ever seen. And either the United States has to default on their debt, or they've got to perpetually push it out into the future long enough to find the alternative and jump ship as it's sinking. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. I would just say that you can only push it off for so long. Eventually you have to default, right? People aren't going to trust you infinitely. Like, hypothetically, if you're someone who makes $100,000 a year, no one's going to loan you $1 billion, right? They'll loan you, 50 grand, and then maybe you can kick that down and they'll loan you 100 grand. And maybe they'll get to 400 grand or 500 grand, but eventually someone's gonna be like, look, you can't pay this loan back. Like, we're not lending you any more money. And that's where the U.S. government's at right now. They've kind of taken on as much debt as they can possibly take on. At a certain point, interest payments start consuming your entire income, which in the case of the United States government is just tax receipts, right? Tax receipts are income, and the debt load is just too big right now. And so we're at a point now where we just have to default on the debt. There's no chance of repaying it. Like, the US government has $30 trillion of debt, and it doesn't have any way to repay it. It doesn't even pretend to have a way to repay it. It's not like they're proposing a bunch of like potential budget plans 5 years from now, or they're going to start generating surpluses and paying down the debt. And they're not even pretending. There is no plan. They will default on that. They have to default on. They have another. Not only do they not have a plan, they have their explicit plan is a further $100 trillion of unfunded liabilities. So another $100 trillion of deficit spending, with no one to fund it. No one's lending the U.S. government $130 trillion. Foreign countries became net sellers of U.S. treasuries in 2014. And so this all just has to kind of unravel. There's two ways to default on the debt. One is the hard default of just like stopping their debt payments, which would, like those debt payments aren't, as much as MMTers like to make them sound hypothetical, those are real debt contracts. And what you're talking about is, an employee at GM who worked his butt off and earned more than he spent, saved for retirement, and went into a retirement fund. That retirement fund's managed by some professional who's hired to avoid inflation, essentially. And they do that by, building this diverse portfolio, which has a 60-40 mandate typically, where they've got 40% bond allocation. A big chunk of that is in U.S. Treasuries, and those U.S. Treasuries are, artificially pinned at 1%, while inflation runs at, 8%, but really it's obviously 15%. So right now we're in the middle of that. This debt default isn't hypothetical. Like it's not like it's not some conspiracy theory that's like going to happen in the future. We're already in it. It started, it's been going on for a long time, but it's really like picked up over the last couple of years where, inflation's running at 15% and, interest rates are pinned at 1%. So, those GM workers are being defaulted on in real time right now. That's not a hypothetical that might happen, in the next couple of years if the U.S. doesn't get its act together. It's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a long way to go.
You'd kind of mentioned it yesterday when we were talking. Did you think about these things or notice these things before you dove down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and swallowed that orange pill?
I did. So I went to school, studied money and banking at a good university. I came out of there kind of fiat pilled. I thought there was a way to, bring like quote unquote enlightened governance to the market for the price of money. And I thought we could navigate that. And that was, a pretty silly perspective in hindsight, especially because I was studying money and banking while Lehman was crashing. Like that was my fourth year money and banking course. We were literally watching that on TV. And so I was familiar with what was happening with the bailouts. And my perspective was just that we need to find a way to get the corruption out of government, and then we can, solve this problem. It was a very naive perspective in hindsight, obviously. I'm not trying to defend it or anything. But that was my perspective at the time. I was a kid, and I heard about Bitcoin in 2011, thought it was stupid. It was like, we don't need this. We got this, etc. And then, I would say around 2015, I started thinking like, oh, we don't got this. And then, but I was busy. I was starting businesses and stuff. And I would say around 2017, Bitcoin just kind of ripped in my face, and there was no denying that. So around that time, I kind of talked to like the fourth or fifth person that I respected and thought was smart. And they were like, look, like, you don't really know what you're talking about. You should dive in on this and try to steelman your anti-Bitcoin arguments. And I was like, okay, I'm a grown up. I can do that. Like, no problem. I'll come back to you and like defeat you in a debate. And, if you're honest and if you're intellectually honest and humble enough to actually pursue that, there's only one way down that.
That's a big piece there.
Right? I was just sitting in my room, just like totally humiliated. Just like, oh man, wow. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I believed this shit.
What about Bitcoin broke for you first? Is it the store value? You were saying it yesterday too. Store value to you was the most important aspect of it originally, or? Yeah.
I would say it was what really clicked for me at first was just this understanding of money as an emergent phenomenon. Like I think that's pretty clear and intuitive, but when that intellectually clicked for me, when someone articulated that, and I fully understood that idea, it became very obvious to me that the market for monetary goods is a dynamic environment. It's always changing. And anything can be money, and there's certain things that make things good at being money. And if something is bad at being money, and something better comes along, it's gonna edge it out.
Yeah.
And just Bitcoin's. So the argument against Bitcoin is the argument that there's going to be a better money than Bitcoin, and so then you're stuck with trying to design a better money than Bitcoin, and that's the real rabbit hole. That's a tough game.
No kidding. Well, money is, you compare money to time. I mean, like it's something you can't really like make, right? Like it's kind of its own being, its own phenomenon, like you're saying, right?
Sushi.
Say that again.
Yeah, no, it's different things emerged as the most saleable good, which is fundamentally what money is, the good for which everything can be bought and sold. And gold kind of emerged on the two things: gold and debt tokens representing gold emerged as the winners for that battle. And I think it was 19th, 20th centuries, humans started to become more consciously aware, and started writing and refining the ideas around what makes a good money. And it wasn't until Satoshi came along and figured out how to construct the optimal money that we were able to actually to build something for that competition. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like, to me, it's like our money we have isn't terrible, right? It's really the people controlling the money. But the problem with that is that nobody should control money. Like that's kind of the issue, right? Like,
yeah, well, that was
like, it's like, why is anybody even controlling money? It just doesn't make any sense now, like looking at it the way
especially now, it seems like a totally ludicrous idea now. And to certain people who knew history better than I did, it looked ludicrous then. And that's why Satoshi started Bitcoin. It's like, okay, I know how this is going to end. And he started Bitcoin. Yeah, it's I can't remember what I was going to say, but
it's an interesting paradigm shift. Michael Saylor, although now that I'm thinking about your story a little bit, he might be a little bit of an op, but who knows? It seems like this Bitcoin stuff, he is acting on his own interests.
I have no idea. I'd be surprised if he hasn't talked to a few people, though.
I'd be surprised as well. I mean, like, I'd also be surprised if the true higher ups, the ones really running the show for the United States, World Economic Forums, trilateral commissions, those kind of people, I'd be shocked if they didn't really like look at Bitcoin and have that same epiphany you had, where it's like, it's not like Bitcoin's trying to really, like, it's not like Bitcoin was made in defiance of the government. It was made as just a better money. Like, that's it. Like, you can cry about it all you want. It is a better money. Yeah. Like, it'd be shocking to me if people on that upper echelon didn't look at it through that lens at some point in the past, like 13 years or so. And when it comes to Saylor, I mean, he's just so good at articulating it and creating analogies and like really putting Bitcoin in the place that it deserves, I think. Like, because when you hear him talk, does he know as much about the technical side of Bitcoin as developers and things like that? No. But how he understands money and history and like where Bitcoin is at in history in terms of like technological revolutions, like he does articulate that aspect of it really, really well. I just don't know. This is a good question to lean into. Is this malevolence? What are the United States, particularly the United States government and Federal Reserve, is it malevolence or is this on purpose? Like, I mean, do they know what they're doing, or is this?
Yeah, no, they know what they're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea, a lot of Bitcoiners disagree with me on this. I think the idea that the U.S. government, especially the people really pulling the strings here, are kind of naive incompetents. I think that idea is absurd. I think they know exactly what they're doing. I think U.S. dollar as global reserve currency has been the key foreign policy imperative of every administration since FDR. It's the one thing that's never in the news headlines, but always the key imperative behind the scenes. I think if you look at all of the major foreign policy decisions made by every administration, they all have a background in the U.S. dollar. I think the only administration that was maybe an exception is JFK. But maybe not even.
It ended up well for him. So
right, exactly.
So
yeah, there's that, and then Saddam starts threatening to sell oil for euros. He gets capped. Gaddafi starts threatening to sell oil for gold. He gets capped. It just seems very obvious, and and there's more too. It goes all the way back to the Saudis, 1971, and through the 70s, and there's more too. But yeah, the idea that they don't know what's going on is just, to me, it's ludicrous. It's just completely, that's like an absurd conspiracy theory as far as I'm concerned. So it's right now.
Slavery. I mean, because it is money slavery. What we are currently, like the system that we're currently under is manufactured. I mean, when you print money the way that they've done it, you are knowingly putting people in very, very poor situations. You are knowingly, like you were saying earlier, when it comes to the home, you are knowingly moving those goalposts forward for people who will never reach it. And to me, I think that's kind of the biggest thing that we just got done with the pandemic, right? Everybody basically believes every government ever. We found out over the last 2 years, which of your friends are just going to believe the government because they said something, and which of them are going to actually do a little bit of homework, maybe even be outwardly against what they're saying because they're it's wrong. Right. It's really an interesting time, because another question I guess I would say is Bitcoin is now really at the forefront a lot of these public issues, right? Because if you are a Bitcoiner, you kind of think if you fix the money, you can fix the world. And if you're looking at the other lens, it's this crazy cryptocurrency that everybody's losing their money on half the time, and it's not really doing anything necessarily for the good, so to speak. That's what a lot of people seem to say. They're like, well, there's no intrinsic value of Bitcoin. And I'm kind of just wondering, do you think Bitcoin is ahead of where it should be? Do you think we in terms of we're ahead, so there's a lot of people misunderstanding Bitcoin because the price of it just jumped up because of obviously mass inflation? I mean, they printed 40% of our money supply because of COVID. Do you think that has a huge role to do with why Bitcoin is such a big issue? Do you think we're kind of on time with Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think if you look at, Alan Farrington has a good line about this. What would it look like, or what would it seem like if it did seem like a global open source programmable money was monetizing from absolute zero or something like that? And it would seem a lot like this, and that's how I feel about it. I think that we're on a roller coaster to 10 million in 2020 purchasing power, $10 million in 2020 stakes, I like to say. And so what's that going to look like? Well, it's not going to be a straight line to 10 million. It's going to be crazy, right? It's going to be a crazy roller coaster. And so I think this is exactly what you'd expect it to look like. I think we all expected the price to go a little bit higher on this run, and maybe it still will. But the reality is it's only going to get more unpredictable in the short term because there's just too much going on.
Too much going on, and there's not, I mean, it's still under $1 trillion asset. So any big player can still mess with the price of it pretty much at their will. And I don't think people really understand that aspect of it either. Sure, Bitcoin's volatile, but is it really that volatile? I mean, you see how many people hate it. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's still 30,000, and people are knowingly bashing this stuff, trying to get the price down, trying to basically cut out Bitcoin's argument from underneath it. It's a really good thing I think I've learned over the past 2 years of Bitcoin, that Bitcoin does not care whatsoever about people's opinions. It just kind of keeps on keeping on, which is why I love it. Yeah. But do you view Bitcoin, if it is an investment, right? I mean, I view it as a savings technology, but I mean, it's a great investment as well, because obviously it's not valued where it should be. There's only 21 million of them. What side of the Bitcoin investment sphere do you think is going to hit first in that goal of 10 million pegged to 2020? Do you think it's going to be people taking it as a store of value? Is it going to be big companies putting it on a balance sheet? Is it going to be the fact that every McDonald's in the world now accepts Bitcoin, so people are like, shoot, might as well buy some? You know,
it's going to be a bit of everything. It's going to depend on who hears the signal, right? Like, let's say Saylor's not an op, right? Like he's just, a guy with a balance sheet problem, like he said, who just did the work. He did the work of like trying to understand Bitcoin. He took 100 hours. He's a smart guy, and he just read and listened with, like real authentic humility and came out the other side and bought Bitcoin. It's just a process of the whole world doing that. And, some people will never do that. Probably 90+% of people will never actually do that. They'll just, opt in intuitively, or because their brother or friend or parent or whatever told them like this is the real deal and they trust them. And then those people get shaken out because they don't have real conviction, and there'll be a whole other process. It'll just be this long process of the world getting orange pilled, and we'll fly up to 500K and we'll crash back down to 50K and we'll go to who knows where. It's just going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be corporations, but like, here's a good example. Like, Saylor bought billions of dollars worth for his corporate balance sheet. My brother took a loan out against his house to buy a little bit. My sister bought with a line of credit. So like a little loan on a house, right? Like let's say hypothetically you have $1 million house and you've got 200 grand worth of home equity, right? And you go take a $30,000 line of credit and you buy some Bitcoin. That is money flowing out of the real estate market and into Bitcoin, right? That's a demonetization of real estate as a store of value into Bitcoin. So it's going to happen in those little chunks. And someone else will have $1 million and they'll have $1 million of home equity and they'll take, 500,000, or they'll take 20,000, or they'll take 100,000. Like, everyone's going to make their own decision. And the point is that that's all happening right now. That's not, and then there's people who just, young people in Toronto who are, clued into the degenerate nature of culture there. They'll take that, that they're trying to save for a house. They'll take that 20 grand a year they're trying to save for a house and they'll just put it into Bitcoin. And so maybe they don't have any like home equity right now, but this is their alternative, and they're just going to start using it as a savings technology right away. And then there's going to be, nation states that start adopting it and start, like I could see a state, and I think there's states working on this. I think like Wyoming, Texas, Oklahoma, I wouldn't be surprised if they start making like 1-2% allocations, right? Let's say their state treasury has, a 10% allocation to gold and a 1% allocation to Bitcoin, and the rest is in treasuries. That's probably going to get you through. That's gonna probably make you whole on the other side of this whole default. Bitcoin's going to 300x, so it'll probably 3x your treasury, right? So it's going to be this weird dynamic kind of like mishmash of corporate purchases and individual savings and sovereign buying and everything in between.
Kind of a quicker question for you, Sean. You've been in Bitcoin a lot longer than the two of us have. I know that I've dealt with my own struggles of having conversations with people that haven't done the research, right? And we were talking about the other night over dinner. Whenever you sit down and you have dinner with somebody, like the two of us, if the three of us were to go dinner, we can have a much higher level conversation about Bitcoin than we could with somebody that hasn't dove down the rabbit hole, right? At this point, you've been in much longer than we have. Do you get tired of just like the very low level question or the low level objection? You're like, okay, so you haven't done any research.
I never get tired of it, man. It's because like I haven't been in it that long. I've only been in Bitcoin for four years ish now, and I remember, man. I'm not a technical person. So I really remember like being really intimidated by, all those, Bitcoin can kind of be broken down into like 10 different topics, and each one was intimidating to me aside from like the macro money stuff. And so I have a lot of sympathy for people with questions, and I love helping people through those because I identify with them.
That's awesome, man. Well, we're going to have you on again at some point in the future to continue shedding light on those questions that people have. Griff, maybe we got to find a way to make, whenever we've got guests coming on, let's find more ways to structure questions for these people to talk about and think about live on the show with us. I think that would be fun. But Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure for you for you to hop on with us to kind of share a little bit about your story, a little bit about your experience and perspective in the Bitcoin world and how it relates to, what real life is. So man, where can people connect with you? I know right down here we've got Twitter. We've got your handle down there. I know you're pretty active on there. I've seen you on there, dude. Like, I think today I saw you posted, you were very active today.
I'm a bit too active on there. Don't follow me. I'll just spam your feed.
Hey, honestly,
you were posting some good stuff.
The big piece of Bitcoin, though, is the community aspect of it, because there is a pretty solid community. And I think it's really interesting that you're like, I don't get tired of answering questions. Man, everybody I've met in Bitcoin is pretty good people. I mean, like, you guys could stop me if you've met some assholes that are in the Bitcoin space.
Oh, that's a fact. That's a fact.
There are assholes, don't get me wrong, but like not the bad kind of asshole, the asshole that's just kind of trying to tell you the truth, not the asshole who's trying to lie to you. You know what I'm saying? A lot of straight up.
Careful about confusing those two.
Yeah, there's got to be if I was to say one defining trait of Bitcoiners I've met at this point, it's like most Bitcoiners who are really about Bitcoin, not like no fool's game about it. They're pretty straight up people in like all areas of their life. They don't really see much use to lie. They don't use it. It's not an effective tool for them, and you fit that bucket, obviously. Like, you're spitting some really good truths. So hopefully a lot of people listen. I like your spam account. I'll follow him on Twitter. I'll tell you what. Oh man,
yeah, it's
good stuff for sure.
I'm a broken record. I just say the same shit over and over again.
Hey, but sometimes the same thing over and over again is hard for people to understand. It's like, I mean, you gotta keep it simple. It's like a lot of the concepts I think we're talking about are not really that confusing. It's more people just aren't open-minded to it. They're just so happy in the current way they do things, like that they just don't want to change it all. But
and basically every tweet I make will be 100% contradiction from what you'll see in the mainstream. So if you're used to seeing mainstream stuff and then you show up on my Twitter feed, you're gonna be like, what the hell is this guy talking about?
Well, that's a good thing. I think we definitely need more opinions like that. We don't need more. I mean, we don't need more mainstream. I think that's a fact. I mean, tired of all the same stuff. Oof, it's brutal. But yeah, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. We're gonna have to get you on again and do it once, like one time, not twice. But we've had so many good clippable things, I feel like, from the past two conversations. And I think that's just a great point. You don't need 100,000 followers to know a lot about Bitcoin. That's the cool part. There's people who have 2,000, people who have 100. They know a lot, a lot of good information.
Yeah, most of the most knowledgeable people I've met in Bitcoin have like 38 followers.
Yeah, they're not even like real.
Circles around here.
They're like bots, or at least you might think they're a bot, and then you're like, no, well, that person's legit right there.
Yeah, well, and usually they're just too busy actually building shit to be on Twitter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you actually understand Bitcoin at a really deep technical level, you're probably doing more important things than, broken record spamming Twitter.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that's what I'll keep doing because I don't know how to do it. So I'll just keep spamming. I'll just keep promoting the good nature that is Bitcoin.
Awesome, guys. Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me,
Sean. Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next time, brother.
All right, boys. Later.
Peace. Good find, Nick. Good find,
man. Huh?
I mean, like it's. I said good find. It's hard to find good guests, hard to find good people, and you found both, all in one. So I don't know how you want to take us out today, but that was a good interview. And for those of you that don't know, we had like a 30-minute conversation yesterday. It was like Little House on the Prairie over there in Oklahoma for Nick. I couldn't get the audio working. So we're like 38 minutes into that conversation. And we were having a really good conversation, honestly. And Nick was like, yeah, I have not heard a thing. And this is actually the guest that Nick met and Nick found. So we didn't want to leave Nick, obviously, out of the whole episode. So we redid it again today.
Well, it was funny because I went back and listened to it after we had gotten off. And you guys were having a great conversation. It was really good because you guys' recordings and everything was super clear. And I was listening to it. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is good. These are good. That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah,
So
he's a
no,
really
I really love hearing about his story. You know, it's interesting looking back on, or I say looking back for him to look back on what his experience has been being in for 4 years. You know, I mean, we haven't been in for that long, and to see kind of what his thoughts were on how the community has changed, what he's learned over that time period. And so, yeah, it's fun to see the community of Bitcoin. We have gotten to connect with it more and more as as we're building the show, as we've been in it longer. And man, I really love the Bitcoin community, man. I'm a huge fan of it. Excited to be a part of it.
Let's leave it on that high note right there.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show, and we will see you next time. Peace.